I mean, looking at Bush as the criminal is absurd. I mean, I remember Albright's, this was Clinton's Secretary of State, when we talked about the 500,000 children under the age of 5 that Clinton and Bush 1 had killed through, quote, economic sanctions that weren't economic sanctions at all, but blockade. And you can read about that in the Brattleboro Reformer, November 1, 1991. Editorial, when is a blockade, not a blockade. My nice capitalist newspaper in Brattleboro got it right for once. November 1, 1991, when is a blockade, not a blockade. We all used, or not we, but the community used economic sanctions. Killed 500,000 children under the age of 5. And what did Albright say? She said, quote, unquote, it was worth the price. Well, it wasn't her kids that died. That's what I mean when I say we have to see each other as brothers and sisters around the whole world, because if it had been her kids, she wouldn't have said it was worth the price.
She's pretending that's collateral damage, and collateral damage doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, yeah. And we got to move past that, or we're going to kill ourselves. So that's what I mean when I say socialism is not an option. Socialism is an imperative.
But we were talking about Dennis Steele. He's in favor of Vermont seceding from the Union and becoming an independent nation. How do you feel about that?
You know, I spoke at the convention at the State House about it. And I can be brought into that, but it's going to be really hard. I mean, what I said in my remarks at that convention is, I can't leave my brothers and sisters from Maine to California behind. Right? I understand the necessity for secession, but the whole country has to secede from the crap that we're involved in. Right? We can't just go by ourselves. I can't leave my brothers and sisters behind. On the other hand, if Dennis and that movement and what's his name from Sudbury, Tom Naylor, who I consider to be the spiritual guide for the secession movement, the spiritual leader. If they get it going and we're going, I'm not going to resist. I'll join it, but very reluctantly. I understand its need. I understand where it's coming from, and I love the folks who are talking about it because they're getting right at the meat of the problem in their analysis. But for me, the synthesis doesn't mean leaving my brothers and sisters behind.
Well, I lived in Quebec for 2 years. I was there when René Lévesque was leading the referendum to separate from Canada. And but I approach it from a slightly different angle than you do. I have mixed feelings about the idea of Vermont seceding. If you look at it from the point of view of the Parti Québécois in Canada, a secessionist movement in Vermont could lead to improved relationships, an improved relationship with the federal government. And even though we wouldn't have to actually secede in order to benefit by having perhaps statewide health insurance, single payer for everyone, and the right to keep our young men here in Vermont to defend Vermont rather than sending them off to war in Afghanistan. But on the other hand, I have mixed emotions about secession, especially taking into account that there are many aspects of the group, Tom Naylor and Dennis Steele. There's a strong libertarian tendency there, and Dennis is.
I don't sense it in Naylor.
No, but especially in Dennis. And
yeah, I know.
He's all for Ron Paul, and the Ron Paul philosophy is really unacceptable to me.
I agree.
Yeah.
See, I'm saying there are political differences between me and Dennis that are not so deep between me and Tom Naylor, because I think Tom Naylor and I are much closer in vision to each other, although he's a secessionist, and I'm not. See, I have sort of the same feelings that you do. I just don't want to. I don't want to lead the movement for secession, but I'm not going to resist the movement for secession. I'm not going to argue against it. I'll argue against Dennis's economics. I've already done that today. But I feel like there's a good spirit in them. But, I mean, the politics of Ron Paul and the economics of Ron Paul, to me, is an anathema. I mean, I've been talking against it all day today as we sit here, against competition, although I did make a little exception in the beginning. I think I said, I'm not talking about your neighborhood guy who's a plumber, or the people who run the little neighborhood bookstore and things like that. That's not corporate capitalism. That's a different kind of capitalism. And even in the Liberty Union platform, you know, it's only a page long, and people can find it at libertyunionparty.org, libertyunionparty.org. And you can go to the Socialist Party site and see our statement of principles, which is I'm wedded to as much as I am to the statement of principles for Liberty Union is pretty much in context with this socialist statement. We've sort of been the representatives of socialism in Vermont. That's where I want to be, and I have no reason to argue against the economics of Ron Paul and how that shows up in the secessionist movement. It's not essential to the secessionist movement, is what I'm saying. Naylor is not Dennis. Right? The private enterprise that I'm willing to put up with is the kind that I described earlier, but what's intolerable to me is corporate capitalism. And then maybe Steele and I can find a bridge. I'm not sure. Maybe he can see that the two of them as so different, where in the first instance the profit made by the person who's got the little bookstore or is the plumber or whatever is not profit from the exploitation of others. It's a return for labor.
Yeah, if he doesn't hire anybody, well, he's not exploiting.
Even if, you know, I thought about that in terms of how we subsidize agriculture, that the subsidy should only go to those producers of agricultural products who, and there are lots of conditions I would put on it, but at least a single person, and if it's a single person who employs others, that the others share equally with the owner in the profits of the farm. No other agricultural subsidies. So I think that's being consistent with what I said earlier about how I see socialism only affecting corporate capitalism, not the individual who is just getting a return for labor. And I said, and that's similar to my position on the banks. The farmer situation is kind of a credit union formation, where the profits from the farm are shared with the owner and the workers equally. That's like the credit union philosophy that I spoke of way back in the beginning when I said we should scrap the banking system and the Federal Reserve System. I think Steele and I agree on the Federal Reserve one. I think that's pretty clear.
Another thing that worries me about Dennis Steele and his group is the drug laws and the effort to legalize marijuana. Well, what do you think about that?
I'm a socialist.
Yes.
So I believe that we should not legalize production, distribution, importation, and production, importation, distribution should not be privatized. I'm a socialist. Use should be legalized. And the only source should be what you produce for your own use or what you get from official outlets like hospitals, doctors, and pharmacies. And it should be available there at a price not to exceed cost and maybe below cost. Because the goal is to get rid of the people who are selling on the street. The goal is to get rid of the salespeople. The goal is to get rid of crime. Of course, the CIA would argue with that since they get so much finance out of the drug trade. I mean, we got to understand that what we're doing is cutting the revenues for the government when we legalize the use. I'm halfway with him. You know, I'm not for legalization of commerce, of production, distribution, importation. I'm opposed to that. I'm a socialist. Right? On the business end of it, I'm a socialist. On the use end, I'm a libertarian. So I'm a middle of the road guy. Don't look at me as a radical.